The late Paul Walker had an extensive acting career that spanned multiple decades and would lead him to become a leading actor in one of the highest grossing action franchises of all time. But before his rise to becoming an action movie star, he starred in a few leading roles in a few low-budget horror films, such as Monster in the Closet and Tammy and the T-Rex, the latter actually being a movie I'd stumbled upon in my youth and thoroughly enjoyed. Once the worldwide phenomenon known as The Fast and the Furious hit theaters and helped propel him into the eye of general audiences, Walker was picked up to star in 2001's on-road thriller Joyride. I had originally seen this movie while browsing cable one night well over 15 years ago when I just so happened to stumble upon it, and, to my surprise, I really enjoyed it. Around that time, I was in my edgy teen phase, so to speak, and wanted my movies to be gory and jam-packed with violence to satiate my need for excitement. Having this virtually bloodless movie about a vengeful truck driver be one of the movies I fondly look back on from my youth is honestly surprising given my taste during my initial viewing. Written by the now household name of J.J. Abrams, Joyride follows Lewis, who is played by Paul Walker, of course, and his cross-country road trip to meet up with his crush, while also looking after his estranged older brother who he had just bailed out of jail. The siblings find themselves in a world of trouble when they play a cruel prank on a truck driver known as Rusty Nail, that not only leads to the hospitalization of an innocent bystander, but also sees them being targeted by their victim in retaliation. The film received mostly positive reception at the time of its release, which of course would lead to not one, but two direct-to-video bargain bin sequels that no one had asked for. As always, if you haven't seen this movie, proceed with caution because there will be spoilers ahead for the trilogy, and of course, nobody likes having movies spoiled for them. Before we fill up our tanks and take a ride on the wild side, if you like what I do here on the channel, please consider leaving a like, a comment, and even subscribing to the channel so you don't miss a single video, and maybe share this video with a friend or two. It all goes a long way to grow the channel. Now, without further ado, let's take a look at one of the hidden horror gems of the early 2000s, Joyride.
You guys ready for an adventure or what?
Everything you say.
Candy cane.
We saw what you did to that guy, you pathetic, lonely freak show.
Will come back to haunt you.
Looking back at the year that Joyride came out, it's really no surprise that it faded into relative obscurity given how much of a stacked year 2001 was for mainstream horror cinema. Jason X, Bones, Jeepers Creepers, The 13 Ghosts remake, and even that weird Ghost of Mars movie from John Carpenter all released in theaters that very same year, pretty much sealing Joyride's fate of falling by the wayside in terms of box office performance. Now I'm sure there will be some people who might not consider this a horror movie, but to that I say, pipe down, adults are talking. One of the strongest aspects of this movie are, of course, its performances. Seeing as Paul Walker already had plenty of experience acting in the lead role, he feels so natural in this role as a nice guy, just trying to do right by the people around him. This is of course contrasted by his hooligan of an older brother, Fuller, played by Steve Zahn, whom some of you may recognize from those Diary of a Wimpy Kid movies that I never got around to watching. The group is then finalized and rounded out with the addition of Venna, who is the crush of our lead and ends up in this sort of weird love triangle with the siblings. I don't know, man, that subplot is weird and just doesn't go anywhere interesting and only serves to make the older brother look like the biggest asshole on the planet. But, as if to make up for this insufferable character, we get one of, if not the best part of this movie, with the antagonist Rusty Nail. He's the only character that appears in each entry in the franchise, albeit being played by a different actor each time. What I always liked about this movie is the fact that, yes, our main characters did fuck up, and at first, they do get what's coming to them. Lewis kind of just idly sits by and lets his douchey older brother get him into trouble, which is what leads to this whole situation happening in the first place. But, of course, even after scaring them half to death, Rusty Nail goes against his promise to leave them alone and continues to terrorize them. From spying on them, to blowing up their car, and even kidnapping Venna, he's this mysterious force that is seemingly everywhere and that you can't escape from. As someone who has taken frequent road trips throughout their adult life, the thought of being pursued like this on the road is absolutely terrifying. Lewis and Fuller pull a GTA and steal a truck to make it over to the next town and hopefully save Venna from being executed by this movie's version of a saw trap. Thankfully, they're able to just barely save Venna from certain death after tussling with Rusty Nail, although he gets away by using the body of a trucker that we see earlier in the film as a scapegoat. The final scene in the movie reveals that our homicidal truck driver survived, as we hear him speaking through a nearby CB radio, setting us up for a sequel that we wouldn't get until well over half a decade later.
Just you and me now. You're the only one left.
Oh God, Melissa.
Yeah, she's dead too.
In 2008, we would finally get a sequel to our favorite highway horror flick, though this time, as I mentioned before, it was a direct-to-video release. Titled Joyride 2: Dead Ahead, this movie is a complete downgrade in every feasible way, and I know I should never have high hopes for sequels like this, but this one got quite bad, quite fast. From the downright detestable characters that are somehow even worse than the older brother from the previous film, to the overall cheapness in terms of film quality, Joyride 2 completely wastes your time with callbacks to the first film to hopefully distract you from how bad this shit ultimately is. This time around, we're stuck with a group of clueless douchebags who break down in the middle of nowhere and somehow end up at Rusty Nail's house, where they go about stealing his prized vehicle as a way to get to the next town. You can watch this movie and just tell how dated it is, and I mean that in the meanest way possible. This movie is quite the stinker. Much like its predecessor, Dead Ahead also blue balls us with a Rusty Nail fake-out death, ensuring a third and thankfully final film. Joyride 3: Roadkill keeps the tone of the second film by giving us an insufferable group of characters that we're stuck with waiting to die for 90 minutes. I'll be generous and give this film a smidge of credit in that its over-the-top, saw-like gore helped me get through this otherwise boring snooze fest. Written and directed by Declan O'Brien, Roadkill follows the same gory formula as Wrong Turns 4, 5, and 6, which O'Brien also wrote and directed. Basically, you take a handful of one-note, almost parody characters, make them do something completely dickish and outlandish, and then you kill them off in the goriest ways you can imagine. It's honestly a Western slasher staple at this point, and these types of movies always make for a good laugh, if not anything else. I also thought it was pretty neat that Rusty Nail was played by Ken Kersinger this time around, the same man who played Jason in Freddy vs. Jason. And because the series likes to recycle everything like it's scared of Captain Planet, we get one final Rusty Nail fake-out death for the road, and honestly, by this point, I'm all for whatever makes this runtime go by faster. If there's one thing these two clown shoes bargain bin sequels have taught me, it's that I should appreciate one-off horror movies more, because someone can always come along and ruin it by making a sequel that didn't need to be made. To close out this video, I think the original Joyride is certainly of its time, but is a solid enough of a film that keeps you tuned in with a simple, easy to understand plot and a strong cast. While the two sequels squander everything that made the first film so good, I have to admit that I'm genuinely impressed with how low they were willing to set the bar. There are other highway and truck-related horror films in the same ballpark as this franchise that might make for a good marathon if you want to watch them all back to back, such as The Hitcher and more recently, Candyland. And with that concludes my thoughts on the Joyride franchise from start to finish. I know there's a small sect of people online who kinda almost remember this movie, and I hope someone stumbles upon this video and it makes them want to check it out. If you have any other on-road horror movies that you'd recommend, let me know down in the comments. I plan on releasing content more consistently again. I meant to have this video out a month and a half ago, but life has been beating me senseless for a bit, so please bear with me. I have a few videos I'm working on concurrently and hope to get those out before too long, so if you enjoyed this video, hopefully you stick around for the next one. Until next time though, everybody, be safe, be kind to one another, and of course, keep watching horror. Bye everybody.